Welcome 80-20 baseball coaches, 80-20 baseball community. Awesome to be here with you. 80-20 baseball, where we believe better youth coaching does not mean designing cuter or more elaborate drills and practices or by reinventing the wheel, but rather by making a much better wheel than is found in the current youth baseball community and has been found in the youth baseball community for a long time. We are here to make our youth baseball environment a lot more enjoyable and successful by praising players, by giving players some freedom, while simultaneously enforcing a few key expectations, along with filling most of our practice time and pregame time with training activities and drills, or training activities / drills that maximize the quality game-like reps. And those activities, those training drills and activities are prioritized by how often those actions, those things happen in the game, and also how important they are to the outcome of games or to the team culture, if we're talking about that. In today's episode, we're going to discuss Greg Maddux's philosophy or strategy on 0-2 pitches, on 0 balls, 2 strike pitches. So when the leverage of the count is completely in the pitcher's favor, we'll discuss his strategy and what he told his pitching coach that was contrary to Leo Mazzone's beliefs and those of conventional wisdom. Want to give a shout out to the Pitching Ninja. That's where I got this information, these comments by Greg Maddux. Definitely a cool account to subscribe to, a good account to subscribe to on YouTube, with the caveat that there's a lot of discussion centered around more advanced pitching strategies, etc. But I always like to give a shout out. And again, what I'm trying to do is go and get all this information and then be the conduit between all that information that's out there, especially the stuff that's more advanced, and to filter it out, not just by how advanced it is or how elementary it is, but also how important it is to youth baseball. Every time I find something or read something or see something or hear something, which is pretty much every day, multiple times a day, I always try to look at it from the lens of a youth baseball coach. So I'll talk about that. I'll share my thoughts on Greg Maddux's 0-2 count pitch strategy. It's pretty interesting, so we'll dive into that. Also, should youth pitchers learn to pitch from the windup or the stretch or both? Because there are no runners stealing bases at most of the youth baseball level, or at least they're not stealing a base once the pitcher lifts his front foot. So, is it best to teach the stretch, the windup, or both? We'll dive into that. Also, I just finished an interesting book, another book called How We Learn to Move, A Revolution in the Way We Coach and Practice Sports Skills by Rob Gray, published a few years back in 2021. Share my thoughts on that. It's a popular book in the physiology realm, the physiology area of coaching skills. Quick review of last week's episode. If you haven't listened to it, go back, listen to that episode. We discussed a pregame tip, and we had our top 5 / top 7 coaching tweets of the month. So if you haven't listened to that already, go back. So before we dive into Greg Maddux's thought, I have an intro message here. So I flew down to Southern California over the Labor Day weekend. Went down there Saturday and Sunday. It's my one trip every year away from the fam. And I hung out with 15 of my grade school buddies. We do a fantasy football draft. We play a wiffle ball best out of 5 series. And got some free tacos out of it. This year, we laid a little wager on it. Losing team paid for the taco truck. And man, those tacos and quesadillas were bomb. And even tasted better knowing they were free because we won on a walk-off, bases-loaded, 2-out hit. And it got me thinking, the reason I'm sharing that is not to talk about what I do on my weekends. You know, I'm really trying to be efficient with the message here and the sharing of information and strategies and tips. But I talked with a buddy while I was there, one of my good long-time buddies, played ball with when I was in youth baseball. And I asked him why he didn't choose to go to Long Beach State to play baseball, but rather to go to Cal State Fullerton. So those are 2 of the premier programs. And in the 90s, they were 2 of the top programs in the entire country. I'm going to tie this into youth baseball and as youth coaches, what we can learn from this. He took a recruiting trip to Long Beach State and he didn't commit, he didn't sign with them, and he chose to go to Cal State Fullerton. Both great options, both cream of the crop back in the 90s. And I asked him why, and he said flat out, his recruiting trip to Long Beach wasn't that great. I said, oh, was it the hotel? Was it the food? They didn't have a limousine picking you up? He said, no. He said none of that. He said he didn't like the vibe at all of the players. And I thought that was interesting. He said he didn't like the vibe of the team. And what's interesting is I went to Long Beach State, played 4 years there. I'm the same year as this friend I'm telling you about. I got a better vibe on my recruiting trip, but I only met 2 or 3 of the players. And looking back now, talking to some of my buddies I played with there, it wasn't a great vibe in terms of team culture. There were so many great things about Long Beach State. The developmental part of it, in terms of skill development, getting you ready for pro ball. Long Beach is a really cool city. But I look back now and I'm thinking, yep, the vibe really hurt the level of success that we had. And we had success. My senior year, we won the Big West Conference. We were one of the top teams in the country, but it wasn't as good as it should have been. We weren't as good as we could have been. And looking back now, that team culture, I truly believe, hurt our chances of success. I'm not saying we were going to win the College World Series or not. What I'm saying is we did not win as many games as we probably could have. And you know what? The team culture vibe, and talking to my buddy about this when I was down there in California, the vibe was really harsh on younger players. So if you were a freshman, it was almost like there were 2 different teams. There were the upperclassmen and the lowerclassmen. And I came in with thick skin. I played basketball and football in high school with some super demanding coaches that never laid out any praise. And coming from a generation that were yelling and screaming was common. So it wasn't a thick skin thing. It was just constantly talking down to the younger players, talking down to all the players. It was just a bad culture. It was definitely a culture that didn't help our chances. This is something that we need to be aware of with our teams and quietly observe and really take it all in and see it clearly, what's going on, the good and the bad. So I thought that was interesting take. My friend said he did not choose to go to Long Beach State, but rather the rival, Cal State Fullerton, simply because of the vibe. He said his chances or his perception of skill development and the possibility of going pro when he was looking at both colleges, he thought Long Beach State was just as good an option, but the difference was the team culture. He did not like the team culture, and it was immediately picked up on by him. Speaking of team culture, Coach Deion Sanders. So almost all of you listeners are right in that age bracket where we watched Deion playing baseball and football, doing his thing as a player. But now that he's a coach, I think he's somebody that we should pay attention to as a coach for a couple reasons. So they had a big win against TCU. I don't think it was as big a win as a lot of people are making it out to be, because I don't think TCU was the second best team last year in college football, but I'm not going to get into that. I was at the Georgia TCU championship game, front row, and TCU was probably the 9th best team in college football last year. But the way they do things and lay out the playoffs and stuff, they ended up in the title game and just got rolled by the Bulldogs. But nevertheless, it's a big win on the road. Coach Sanders, Deion, took over Colorado football last year. I believe they had 1 win. So to turn around and go on the road and beat a team, even if they're not a top 10 or top 25 team, TCU is still a quality opponent. And what I like about Coach Sanders and what we can learn from him is he does the combination that we talk about here on 80-20 Baseball so well. He shows a ton of love for his players, to his players. He genuinely cares about his players, but he also holds them to high expectations. So he does the two. So I want you all to, if you get a chance, watch him coach. If you can catch a game, and not live, but on TV, or watch a video of him coaching at practice, or there's a couple good YouTube videos out there of him giving practice talk speeches, even his introductory speech to the players at Colorado when he got the job. He's firm, but he shows a lot of love. I love that combo. You all know I love that combo. Still to this day, the belief, I think, by so many coaches and parents is that the two cannot coexist, that they're mutually exclusive. I couldn't disagree more based on experience, evidence, and seeing what works and what doesn't. Don't be a drill sergeant, but discipline is vital. Having high expectations like hustle, 100% respect for our teammates, no excuses. Here's one, speaking of no excuses. So Deion Sanders brought out Michael Irvin, the famous Cowboys wide receiver. A friend of his brought him out to one of the practices before the first game, and he let him give a speech to the players. But you know what caught my attention the most was the t-shirt he had on. The t-shirt that Michael Irvin had on the back, it said no excuses. Okay, that by itself, that's a dime a dozen on athletic t-shirts, team t-shirts. That message has been played out. That no excuses is on every t-shirt and has been forever. But the next line, the second line on his t-shirt, on the back of Michael Irvin's t-shirt. So you got a Colorado shirt on, said Colorado on the front, and on the back it said no excuses. And the second line is what I think put it way over the top in terms of the effectiveness of the message. It said no excuses, no explanations. No excuses, no explanations. Man, that second part is so key. Never seen that, but it's so key when you really dive into it and think about it. Because players will come to us, people will come, kids will come to us, our friends, adults, our coworkers will come to us, and we might call them out and say, hey, no excuses. They'll say, it's not an excuse. I'm just explaining. Now you see where that shirt comes into play now? You see how the two together dismantle anything a player can use as a crutch or as a reason why they didn't get it done? Doesn't mean that we should just tell players not to speak up. Of course we should, especially with injuries or safety concerns. We need kids to be able to feel free to speak up, speak their mind. But I think all players know and all kids can understand where we don't want excuses made and we don't want an explanation. We just want them to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and do their thing, improve it, get better. Because it really hurts them the most. It hurts them the most. They start believing these explanations and these excuses, right? So I love that Colorado football t-shirt, that message on the back. No excuses, no explanations. So I love Coach Deion Sanders' approach. I don't know how successful he's going to be in the big picture. I think he's going to be successful. I think he's already shown that he can be successful. And I think he hires really good coaches around him. And I think coaches want to coach with him, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators. And I also think players want to play for him. He had 85 or 86 new players come to Colorado. There was a lot of players going there. So if you think being firm and having high expectations like Coach Sanders is doing or he's setting forth at Colorado, he's still getting all the players, and he'll continue to get all the players. In fact, when he, and my guess is sooner rather than later, will get a huge offer from an SEC school, he'll get even better players because they want to play for him. But if you listen to him talk, there's not a lot of nonsense. I mean, he just shows a lot of love, but he's firm. So somebody to keep an eye on. Now you go, well, he's a college coach. I get it. But we can see videos of his speeches, his discussion with his players. We can see him up close on video. We can all see that. So it's a good example. Like I've said before, there might be a great coach in the local youth community that I know, but it's really hard for you to relate to him. You don't know who he is, and it's really hard to get access to seeing that coach in action. So we can see Coach Sanders in action, and I recommend you try to take that in. Last but not least, on Monday of Labor Day, I took my daughter to the Boise Hawks baseball game, minor league baseball game, and it got me thinking, one thing that youth players can get out of going to college games or even varsity high school games or professional games, minor league games, major league games, one thing they can get out of that is they can see what it looks like at that level. They can see what the possibilities are. It opens their mind to what can be done on a baseball field. Taking youth players to a game that's up a level from them. Take them to a high school, local high school game, and have them watch it, not just on the backfield playing over the line. Have them watch it so they can see that speed. They can see what they're going to have to be able to do if they want to play the next level. All right, so let's move on to the Greg Maddux 0-2 pitch strategy. So Greg Maddux said, and I was listening to a YouTube video, I believe it's Rob Friedman over at the Pitching Ninja, and Greg Maddux's take on the 0-2 pitch strategy. And his strategy was different than what his famous pitching coach, Leo Mazzone, believed and was coaching his the rest of the staff up to do. And it was definitely different than conventional wisdom. Greg Maddux, using the information that said the worst batting average of any count is on an 0-2 pitch. So Greg Maddux said, hey, if the hitters are doing the worst on 0-2 pitches, if they're the least productive on 0-2 pitches, then he's going to use that 0-2 pitch to his advantage. He will try to get hitters out. So his goal was to get hitters out on 0-2 pitches. And his coach, Leo Mazzone, the pitching coach, said, don't you dare give up a 0-2 hit or an 0-2 home run, etc. This is what he said. He said, I told Leo, I said, Leo, hey, I may lead the league in 0-2 hits. I may lead the league in giving up the most 0-2 hits, but I'll lead the league in getting the most 0-2 outs. And I thought, he's got a point there. Conventional wisdom is waste a pitch or miss low or miss outside or miss up, miss out of the zone. Whatever you do, don't throw it down the middle. So his strategy was, let's go after hitters 0-2. I'm after hearing this from Greg Maddux, who did more with less And pretty much any pitcher in baseball history, maybe, and definitely of our generation, of our lifetime, I think it's a good idea to listen to what he's saying. He had a lot of success for a lot of years. So if you're coaching up your pitchers to be really fine on an 0-2 pitch, if you're coaching up your pitchers to more often than not waste a pitch, let's not get too cute. Maybe we don't have the catcher set up way outside 0-2. That doesn't mean he's throwing it down the middle. He wasn't saying he was throwing it down the middle, throwing cookies, but he wasn't stretching out the zone. He wasn't trying to miss a foot off the plate or bounce something on purpose. So I just thought this was something that would be useful for all of us when we're coaching up our pitchers. And it made me think about what happens after we waste a pitch or a second pitch, and now it's 2-2. What's the production rate look like for hitters in that count? So sure, the 0-2, they got statistics that are not that pretty in terms of productivity from the hitter side in an 0-2 count, but all of a sudden they get to 2-2 or 3-2 because we started messing around. Now their chances of getting a hit, a double, a single, a walk greatly increase. And I think at the youth level, more than any level, you go after them. You go after them. 0-2, go right after them. Really coach up your defense in practice on ground balls, fielding ground balls, catching fly balls, making accurate throws, and then go after them. Fewer walks. All right, before we dive into should youth pitchers learn to pitch from the windup or the stretch or both, coaching quote of the week. Quote, if you're a manager, you can't get frustrated and be emotional. You have to continue to steer the ship. You can't let go of the wheel because who knows where it will go then. End quote. Kirk Gibson. Love me some Kirk Gibson. The more I learn about him and his days in Detroit, and of course his famous season with the Dodgers, the more I like Kirk Gibson as a player. I'm not sure I'd want to hang out with Kirk Gibson. He seems too serious for me. When I hang out with people, there's got to be some humor, some laughing, some joking, not taking everything so serious. But I think his message here is golden. Quote, if you're a manager, you're a coach, you can't get frustrated and be emotional. You have to continue to steer the ship. You can't let go of the wheel because who knows where it will go then. So true in youth baseball, youth sports, because kids aren't going to be able to, not only can they not drive on a road, on a freeway, not only are they not old enough to drive a car, they're not ready to drive the team by any means. So while the players might lose their cool, they might lose it, we can't. We are the adults. We have to continue to steer the ship. Not only that, we have to set an example and be a really good role model for what we want our players to do and be and how we want them to act. I got a bonus quote of the week for you, coming from another firm person who liked to frown a lot too. So Kirk Gibson, he liked to frown a lot, right? And I like Kirk Gibson, but he did frown a lot. He always had that scowl. Another person who is synonymous with a scowl. If I tell you Chicago Bears football coach, right now you're all like, yep, Mike Ditka. Yep, he was a scowler. All right, so I guess these coaching quotes of the week have a theme here, coming from two dudes who had the famous scowl. Mike Ditka said, you're never a loser until you quit trying. End quote. I love that one. I love that on a shirt, or I like that on a banner or something in the dugout. I think elementary school teachers and middle school teachers should have this up there. You're never a loser until you quit trying. This is the kind of message that we need to instill in our young players, in our youth, in our kids. Such a good message. Love that message. All right. Should youth pitchers learn to pitch from the windup or stretch or both? So this is for the levels where base runners can't steal. I recommend they practice with the one they get the best results in. So whatever they get the best results in would be the one I would have them pitch from. And I mean results meaning in the game or with hitters, not in the bullpen session by itself, because once you get a hitter in there, we all know that can change the dynamics. The pitcher can, clam up a little, or they can do better depending on the situation. But I recommend going with the windup or the stretch based off of the results the pitcher gets. The challenge with the windup that I see is there's very little reward from using the windup. There's very little benefit. I'm not saying there's not. And for some pitchers, that rhythm and that movement, that rhythm really helps them and helps them get to the next part, the key parts of the delivery. But I've seen more often than not, the windup gets players off balance. It gets them out of position, meaning like out of a good pitching position, posture, etc. And they can't quite recover from it once they get their knee lift going up, their leg lift going up, and then moving towards the plate. So I don't mind a windup. I think it should be simple. But if a pitcher can pitch from the stretch effectively, that's great. Here's the caveat to pitching from the stretch only, is when these pitchers get old enough and the runners can steal when they lift their foot. What I've seen over the years is pitchers that pitch only from the stretch. They don't do a good job of separating the two different stretch deliveries. they don't do a good job separating the two, meaning the one when nobody's on base, higher leg lift, get their lower half a little more involved, versus when there's a runner at first that's fast and is probably going to steal, they got to go quicker. So the challenge or the problem I've seen over the years is pitchers don't separate their stretch deliveries, or they know they have two different stretch deliveries. They have a slower one and a faster one, but they don't always differentiate them during the game at the right times. So that's something to keep an eye on. If they can do both, great. I think the windup's overrated. I think it helps a few players with their rhythm. You are seeing a lot more modified windups these days with pitchers doing less, almost kind of a hybrid version. But at the end of the day, base it on results. So I hope that helps give you a starting point to help coach up your pitchers when it comes to that question. I saw that question out there from some coaches and I wanted to address it. All right, so I finished a book called How We Learn to Move, a Revolution in the Way We Coach and Practice Sports Skills by Rob Gray. I thought the book was interesting. I don't necessarily recommend youth coaches reading it. I would recommend coaches the high school level and above, give it a listen if you have time. The book itself was good. It was basically talking about how we train, like what a repetition should look like. Should we just rep the same movement over and over again, or should be some variability in it? Should we challenge ourselves with different kind of handicaps in terms of handicapping our drills a little bit, different equipment to make the drill not just varied, but a little bit more challenging in certain ways to then help our game under the lights or once the game starts? One of the challenges of trying to do what the book was talking about for youth sports. So anybody who's read this book, it's kind of a popular book that came out recently. And again, it's how we coach and practice sports skills. So this is right up the alley of all the coaches here in youth baseball. But the downside of following the message, no matter how accurate the message is about how we should run drills and training activities, the downfall for youth sports, for youth baseball, when you have 2 practices a week, 1 practice a week, a couple hours here, a couple hours there, I believe it's way more important to have fewer drills with less variability. I wouldn't run a drill for like 5 minutes and then switch it up, and how I wouldn't switch the drill into it like taking a different shape or form. For example, you have a ground ball drill, you run the ground ball drill for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and sure, you're working on throws to first, double plays, throwing some other things to mix it up. You vary how hard you hit the ball. You vary where you hit the ball or where the ball's hit for the players to work on different reps. So there's definitely some variability to match the different things that happen in the game. The thing with this book was talking about doing things that, and again, I don't want to dive too much in, but if you do read this book by Rob Gray, I like Rob Gray. I really think he's onto something here, but I'm trying to help coaches at the youth baseball level get the most out of our time, effort, and really apply the things that are most important to our level and to our kids, our players, so they can be the most successful. And sometimes it's saying no to things. A lot of it's saying no to things that we see that are just much more applicable to varsity baseball, college baseball, pro baseball. So while this book had some really good stuff and a good message about questioning conventional wisdom, I think it gets in the area, the realm of getting too cute. Back to the intro message at the beginning of this podcast episode. I just think it's getting too cute with our drill design. I'm all for variability in drill design, but not so much that we spend an excess amount of time setting up or transitioning our drills. We need quality reps. We need quality reps that are game-like. And we need as many quality reps that are game-like that happen in the area and set up in a way that prioritizes and allocates more time to those things that happen more often in the game and less time to those things that happen less. That's the key. I don't think we need to have a ton of different drills. I don't think we need to get cute with our drills. We don't have time to get cute. So while I like the book by Rob Gray, and I really like the message Rob Gray has had over the years, just something to keep an eye on when we are learning and listening and reading and hearing and seeing from these more advanced coaches. All of you could understand what Rob Gray is explaining in this book. You'd all get it, but I don't think it's usable, and I don't think it's necessary, and I think it's counterproductive to be using a lot of it or the main message with youth baseball. There's a few pieces you could try to tie in, but that's down the road. So if you're a high school coach listening or a college coach, I'd see if there's something you could take out of that. But just want to share that. I like to share the things that I'm taking in and then trying to bring it to you and filter it out and really trying to give you my take, the pros and cons of whatever it is, whether it's a video, a book, an experience, etc. And a lot of times it's not a question of, is it good information or even if it's great information? What's important, I think, is that we really filter it down and say and vet it from the perspective right off the bat, no pun intended, is this a strategy or a coaching tactic that we should use with our youth baseball teams and players? Or is that something that should be left to the more advanced levels that have a lot more time and skill levels that have progressed a lot further? And that's why 80-20 baseball was born. That's why we started this almost 200 episodes ago, almost 4 years ago. Speaking of episode 200, next week in episode 200, I'm going to share out a conversation I had with a parent whose kid plays for a Driveline youth team. And Driveline baseball is very popular. It's Kyle Bodie. He's the founder of it, and it's become very popular. They've moved up into pro ball, but they're also really trying to work with the youth level. And I talked with a parent who has a kid who plays for Driveline Youth Baseball, and there's a couple really cool things that they're doing that I want to share with all of you. And the question that I asked the parent was, how does Driveline Youth Baseball, how does the Driveline Youth team train differently than other teams that kid has played on in the past, or other teams, other youth teams in their area? And pretty interesting answer. I'm a fan of Driveline. I know they got dismissed early on, and some people still dismiss them as kind of a fad or a group of kind of baseball nerds that are trying to be coaches, but I don't agree with that. And again, I've flown over to Driveline and did a tour and spent some time over there, and I like what they're doing. I like where they're coming from. And recently they've been diving into youth baseball a little bit more. So I want to share something that this parent shared with me. Also a tip for getting parents to stay humble. So you're a coach, right? So you're coaching a team, working with your team. Sometimes the hardest part can be the parents, of course. So I have a tip for getting parents to stay humble and helpful at the same time. I'll share that next week, and we'll discuss 3 different things that we can do when practicing a skill with a player that can't get it, that isn't successful the way we're doing it. So 3 things that we can do to help a player or players or a team that's not having success with the way it's being practiced or trained up at this time, or the way we're doing it right now. So 3 ways we can change it up, mix it up, vary it up, with the hopes of getting that skill a lot better. As always, it's awesome to be here with all of you. Head over to 8020baseball.com, get the drill design guide. You can follow me on Twitter or X, 8020_baseball, 8020_baseball. Support the podcast, share it with a friend, share it with somebody, share it out. That would be the best way to help support this podcast and to give back. Email me your success stories, your questions, something you might want to have me discuss or break down or analyze on this podcast. And until next week, let's all take care of ourselves, our health, our families, our close friends, and the baseball community. And I know you're already all doing that. Let's take it out to the field. Let's take this information out there to practice, out there to the training environment. And thank you all for being coaches. You should be very proud of yourself. Being a coach is an awesome thing, not just the experience, but also what you're giving back to the youth community, to the next generation, to your community. So thank you. And until next week, adios.